but I'm concerned about the morality of our government. We used to be the country that people looked to, that they could believe in. And without moral authority, I don't see how we can have a commanding presence on the world stage other than through might and our financial strength. But that be that as it may, Julian Assange, hero or villain?
For me personally, he's neither.
How would you characterize him?
He was just a journalist and he got information and he published it. That's happening every day in Washington. So I didn't see him as either a hero or a villain. I just saw him doing the same things that many journalists are doing every day.
Fair enough. And Edward Snowden, hero or villain?
Villain.
Why?
So it drives me crazy when people describe Snowden as a whistleblower, because within the intelligence community, if you're a whistleblower, that means that you've done one of two things. You have either gone to the Inspector General's office for your agency, or you can go to the intelligence oversight committees in Congress. There's two of them, the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence and the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence. Employees are permitted to file whistleblower complaints with those entities. So if you're a true whistleblower, the first thing you do if you have a problem with something is you go to your management. And then if your management does not give you satisfactory answers, you have those two avenues that you can pursue. Snowden didn't do any of that. He just leaked to the press. That makes him a leaker. That makes him a felon, not a whistleblower.
Well, I've given a lot of thought to him. I mean, he was ratting out people that were high in our government who violated the laws of our government. But I think you make a very compelling point. Let me ask you, on a counter perspective, whether you would, if you could put yourself in his shoes, if you would feel comfortable going to those entities that you described and listed, and felt that you would be safe in doing so.
So whistleblowers have protection. And if I ever had came across something like that I felt so strongly about that wasn't correct and I wasn't getting the right answers, I would absolutely feel safe pursuing those options and I would pursue them both. What I would not do is just go to the press and leak. That makes you
Well,
a
I think that's a
felon.
very
You
fair answer.
violate your oath. And he should have at least tried it, but he didn't
I,
even try it.
I think trying it would have beat going to, where did he go? Singapore, or he fled the country and went to the Far East and then landed in Russia after having, I think he felt like the U.S. government was on his tail and were about to get him extradited. And so he fled,
Absolutely.
which is a little sketchy. And, this country seems to have an obsession with Russia. It seems like every great leader has always felt like they had to identify an enemy. Donald Trump, I think, has tried to establish some sort of a relationship with Putin on the theory of keeping your friends close and your enemies closer. But then really going to Moscow, and he's achieved Russian citizenship, leads me to believe that he's probably had to give up some pretty important secrets to be able to achieve that status.
Oh, more than that. The only way he gets to stay in that country is if he fully complies with debriefs and tells them literally every single thing he knows about U.S. intelligence, which
And that
makes
would be
him a
treasonous.
traitor.
Yeah,
That's a
totally.
traitor. And, there's only one criminal law that's embedded in the Constitution, and that is being a traitor. And so then that carries the death penalty. And I'm okay with that.
I think we're 1-1 now, Joe. I'm going to claim victory on the Kennedy assassination. I'm going to give you Snowden. You have actually moved me from being a Snowden defender to neutral or better. I think you make some very compelling points. And if you really wanted to be a change effector, I think going and working within the system would have been the way to do it. So let's talk about treason for a moment. Now,
Sure.
we know, I think we can conclude with pretty good certainty that the current president of the United States has accepted money from our adversaries directly or indirectly. His son Hunter, I haven't heard anybody offer a justify or not a justification, but I haven't heard anybody push back on the notion that he accepted $3 million from the mayor of Moscow, a Porsche, diamonds, and money from a Russian oligarch. He was on the board of Burisma in the Ukraine, where we're now sending billions of dollars. His father went to the Ukraine and threatened to withhold U.S. aid, and we have him on videotape bragging about it. He
Bragging.
says that he demanded that the person investigating corruption in the Ukraine and that they were looking at Biden himself be removed, or he was going to withhold foreign aid from the United States. And then we have this little inconvenient fact that the Bidens have been proven to have accepted $3 million from a Chinese organization with direct ties to the CCP. It sounds like corruption to me. And then when you couple that with having a spy balloon being allowed to traverse the United States, hover over America's most sensitive nuclear bases for a week, only to be shot down over the Atlantic after the mission was completed, are we approaching treasonous behavior?
I think there's a case to be made for it. I have controversial opinions about this because, my goal, what I would like to see for our country is for people to come together more, right? We've become very tribal, and and I write about this in my book because I experienced it. I live in Washington, D.C. It voted
Yes.
92% for Joe Biden in 2020. I'm surrounded by Democrats, and these are people who are my neighbors, family, friends, loved ones. But after 2016, they were in deep despair from having lost. They all thought Hillary was a shoo-in. They were hanging the buntings for her coronation. And then Trump came along like the Grinch and stole their election from them. And they started calling him, an illegitimate president. And they came up with the whole Russia collusion hoax coup. And so they became hooked on the hatred, right? The just the vitriol and the absolute hatred that was fed to them by their political party elites. And this is what led to all the Trump derangement syndrome, right? And it became what bound them together, the hatred. And I would like to see that stop, and I'd like to see a lot of my neighbors won't even talk to me anymore because I'm more conservative than they are. And it's unfortunate because I'll debate and talk with anyone, but I would like to see people come together more. And I think if we keep up this cycle where an administration comes in and then they go after the previous administration, I think that needs to stop. And what I would like to see Trump to do is to show mercy to those people who showed no mercy to him. And I do think it should all be investigated. The American people should be presented with the truth, and it needs to be investigated. But at the end of all that, I would like to see Trump just pardon a lot of them and move on with running the country.
Joe, I have been trying to sort out in my own mind how I would like Donald Trump to handle this. It is wrong that he would be impeached twice under false pretenses. It is wrong that he has been indicted and had to have paid millions of dollars and sat in a courtroom for as many days as he had under basically what are phony and fake charges that one by one seem to have gone by the wayside. And there are a couple still remaining. He's got to deal with Jean Carroll, that little lawsuit. Jack Smith has filed a new complaint alleging an insurrection on January the 6th. So they're not done yet. But I've told our listeners for the last 2 years that I really believe there needs to be a cleansing in America. All of the dirty secrets need to come out and be put right on the table. And the people who have been guilty of doing these things need to be accountable. I think a perfectly acceptable outcome would be if they are publicly disgraced for the actions that that they have taken. And then if Trump wants to turn the other cheek and pardon them, I think that would be a great way to resolve all of this. Maybe that act of benevolence would bring us back together. But I have to say that my paradigm, it seems to me that we keep taking the high road and they keep punching us below the belt. And so, would that benevolence have the effect that we desire? Because it just doesn't seem to have worked in the past. So, would
It's
we expect a different result this time?
it's true. That's a fair point. One of the points I make in my book is that there was a time when the Democrats were saying, when they go low, we go high. And they
Yeah,
felt so good about themselves, right? But the thing is, when they were saying that, they controlled all of the government. They controlled
and
the
they were
entire
going low.
executive branch, both houses of Congress, and half the federal judiciary. It's very easy to have slogans like that when you control all the power. But as soon as they lost the presidency, they behaved like a contumacious child that had to share a toy, throwing a temper tantrum, and all of a sudden their motto became democracy sucks. We must undermine it, right? And
Well, and
so there is no guarantee that they're ever going to come around. But I think we have to try. When Biden got elected, one of their sayings was, "Oh, now the adults are in charge." Well, we've all seen that that's not the case. My goodness, if these are the adults, just imagine the damage the kids would do because we do not have the adults in charge. And so it's difficult, and reasonable people could disagree on this. I I come down of, unfortunately, someone's got to be the adult. Someone has to make the first move. Otherwise, the cycle just keeps getting, perpetuated, and that's not in anyone's interest. I start my book by looking at George Washington's farewell to the nation in 1796. And he warned the nation of a number of things. But the one that he had the greatest warnings about was the rise of the two-party system, because Washington said the baneful effects of the spirit of party will alienate Americans from each other. He saw this happening in his time. Just from the infancy of our nation, he saw this happening. And back in those days, the only way you had to disseminate rhetoric was, a pamphlet in a town hall speech, and even then he feared the political passions that would be aroused through the two-party system, and that people would, become alienated against each other, and it could destroy the unity of our country. What's interesting is Washington's farewell speech, he also did a whole section on religion and morality and how important it is to have religion and morality in the government. That never gets quoted anymore, but it's in there. And it was all put very eloquently. And so I think his warnings were prophetic, and we need to start taking the medicine that our doctor prescribed for us many years ago.
so what was, I mean, it's pretty obvious to me and probably to most of our listeners by now, but what was your motivation for writing this book? When did you begin? How long did it take you? And I
Sure.
want to know how it's doing.
During my career, one of my areas of expertise was espionage investigations and prosecutions. And I have worked espionage cases across the full spectrum, right from their inception, when we first get some reporting that causes us to look at someone, all the way through early investigation, mature investigation, trial. I've even helped craft post-verdict jury instructions. And I specialized in the Classified Information Procedures Act, which governs the use of classified information in all federal criminal prosecutions. And I've worked on appellate issues. I've worked espionage from just about every angle. I'm probably the only person in American history to have that level of expertise in the areas of espionage investigations and prosecutions. And so I was retired for just about 1 year when the FBI raided Mar-a-Lago. Now, one of the categories of espionage cases I worked on were the cases where senior government officials had been accused and were investigated for mishandling classified information. There were only 4 of those cases in U.S. history. I worked on 3 of them. That was John
Unbelievable.
Deutsch, Sandy Berger, David Petraeus, and of course, Hillary Clinton. I'm one of the few people to have actually read the fabled Clinton emails. And I want to state for the record, I am not suicidal. Anything funny ever happens to me, you know where to look. And
Are
so,
you are you inferring through a little bit of humor that the nickname Hillary might have some substance behind it?
oh yes, oh yes, and
Were there any incriminating emails that you can talk about in her
oh
email?
yes, yeah. And what came out in the case was that she had a little over 100 classified emails on her home server that she had arranged to have all of her government records or emails stored in her home, which is unlawful. And a little over 100, this is what came out publicly. But I can tell you, and there were a number of them, a dozen or so that were at the top secret level, highly sensitive. But there was actually a much higher number of classified documents. I was working with the State Department on the classification review process, and they were purposefully downgrading documents. And maybe it was just to avoid embarrassment on their part or to protect Clinton. I couldn't tell which. But if you watch FBI Director Comey's press conference on the Clinton case, you will see that he says in there at one point that there were a little over 2,000 emails that were up classified. Now, I'd never heard that term before, and I've never heard it since. And I worked with classified information every day for 25 years. So what Comey was claiming was that upon review, many of the emails, over 2,000, were found to be classified. But at the time they were sent, they were not classified. Now, that's possible. That can happen. Could it have happened with over 2,000? Almost certainly not. And from what I saw the review, all of those emails were probably classified when they were sent, and they were just being mislabeled to protect Clinton or the State Department or both. But either way, even without those, she still had over 100 classified documents and over 30,000 federal records, which she had basically stolen from the government.
So let me ask you on the Mar-a-Lago raid. I try and look at things pretty much on a continuum, and on the one side of the continuum, I would say that just take it for face value. There was grave concern about the documents in Mar-a-Lago containing classified sensitive information that Trump shouldn't have had, and it was a legitimate search and seizure. I don't buy that one, by the way. Then you can put all the way over here that in those documents, Trump contained such damning information that someone was determined and obsessed with getting it back for self-preservation. There are a whole bunch of iterations in between. Where do we put it on that continuum?
So I was most anxious to see the FBI affidavit that supported the probable cause determination for the raid. Now, the Biden administration fought tooth and nail to keep that FBI affidavit off the public record. But eventually, they had to put it on the public record, and it was heavily redacted. But the parts I wanted to see were not redacted because I had drafted personally hundreds of those types of affidavits and supervised the drafting of thousands throughout my career, where you are explaining to a federal judge the system of classification, how it all works, what the rules are, and then also the classified information that you think is at issue in the particular case or controversy before the court. And so when I read that FBI affidavit, I could not believe what I was reading. They were misrepresenting the law. They were misrepresenting facts. And they didn't even get the proper standard for classification in the affidavit. And so it was sloppily drafted, and it was misrepresenting many things to the court. And it just blew my mind. Now,
shouldn't there be accountability for that? I mean, you're just saying that that is an abuse of power, a travesty of justice. My God, they went into Melania Trump, the former first lady's dressing room, and rifled through her drawers. It is just disgusting to me that we would treat a former president and his family in that manner.
Armed FBI agents who were authorized to use deadly force. How could that ever be okay in our country? Never. So, it should never be okay.
I place it in lawfare, political vengeance, a kind of like January the 6th. It was a made for television moment, and I think it backfired on the Democrats, thank God. But I do feel that there needs to be not revenge, but accountability, so that doesn't happen again.
I agree, and the accountability needs to extend not just to the politicians, but to the career people who know better. I know 100%. Some of the people in DOJ who approved that warrant, and I know that they know better. But they just became drunk with the power, drunk with the politics, drunk with the hatred, and the raid.
Donald Trump.
And the indictment is even worse than the raid. There are 40 felony counts in that indictment. 32 of them are for classified documents. I encourage your viewers to read the book because I don't have any histrionics. I don't exaggerate. Every criticism I have is backed up by my experience and what I found in researching for the book. And any reasonable person could look at the two cases between Biden's case and Trump's case and see that there was inequity and that they were not fairly
Sure.
handled. But you can't see the depth of the deviancy that went into these cases, how far they went, how devious they were to cover up Biden's malfeasance, while at the same time they were bending over backwards to misinterpret the laws and misinterpret facts purposefully to create illegality on Trump's behalf. When Biden's conduct was much worse and Trump didn't do anything illegal. If you look at the indictment, it's fascinating for me because nowhere in the indictment do they allege that Trump knew what was in any of the boxes. They don't even allege that. They don't even allege that Trump packed any of the boxes or that he knew what was in them. They
So
have
he
a
lacked
unique,
criminal intent, is what I'm understanding you to say.
yes, and knowledge. He didn't even know that any classified was in there. And so what they do is they create a new form of causation. What they say is, as he was leaving the White House, Trump caused all the boxes to be packed. And that's all they say. Now, with Biden's case, they took the exact opposite approach. When Biden got caught with classified in boxes, what one of the excuses that was given by DOJ not to prosecute Biden was that Biden didn't personally pack the boxes and wouldn't have known what was in there. There was some negligence on behalf of staffers. And I'm actually okay with that because for some of the stuff Biden had, that's probably true. But then you have to carry that over to Trump's case as well, the same logic. And they took the exact opposite approach in Trump's case. And in Biden's case, there is no doubt, no reasonable person could doubt that Biden knew that he had classified information all over his house. He had over 100 classified documents that we know of, and we were not given, the public has never been given a full accountability or a full number. But I know because I counted them all in the appendix, the ones that are listed, not all are listed. There's over 100 that were in the house. Many were top secret, and they were everywhere. The first level den, the third level den, in a grocery bag outside of his bedroom, in his personal office, right, his library, in filing cabinets. Some of the files were written in his own handwriting, and classified documents were placed inside.
Amazing.
There is no doubt that he knew he had classified documents, and
Joe,
they were all over the house.
you're going up against some pretty powerful forces. Do you worry about your personal safety? I know you somewhat frivolously said you're not suicidal, but do you worry about your safety at all?
I get that question a lot. And what I've said is that unless my book gets high visibility and high traction, if the message starts to resonate, there might be some danger to me. But right now, the book just got published 6 weeks ago. I have just recently appeared on national television. I was on the Jesse Waters primetime show on Fox twice already. And the book sales are going well, but not great. But the message is starting to resonate. And so a part of me thinks, I should just keep my eyes and ears open because it could be that there are people who would want to come after me because they will want to discredit me. Whether they would try to physically harm me, I don't think so. I mean, my book's been written. It's already out there. But what they would do is try to discredit me in order to discredit the message. But that's very hard. No one wants to debate me on this topic because no one has my experience, and I've laid it all out in the book.
Well, I want to thank you for your courage, your transparency. You are a very credible person to me. And we've had a great conversation, pushed you a little bit, and you didn't get defensive. You answered the questions calmly. And I felt like we had a very good intellectual discussion. And for that, I am very grateful. Where can we find your book?
So the book is on Amazon. It's Dangerous Injustice: How the Democrats Weaponized DOJ to Protect Biden and Persecute Trump. I also have a website, sweeneyjb.com, with a link to Amazon. And I'm starting to populate the website with a lot of additional things because I discovered so much malfeasance. I couldn't even get it all into the book. So I'm putting a lot of things on the website as well, and I encourage people to check that out.
Well, thank you for coming on The Truth today. It has been an honor and a pleasure to have you. And I hope our paths will cross in the near future. I'd
I
love
hope so. I'll
to.
come back anytime.
Thank you very much. Joe
Thank
Sweeney,
you.
author of Dangerous Injustice. I commend it to you. You can also download it on Kindle, which is what I did, and it's right here on my laptop. And I'm about halfway through it, and I look forward to finishing it. And we've told you the truth today. I'm John Gordon.